Good morning and welcome to the April 26, 2023 Allegheny County Legislators Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm Kevin Fred Demick, Vice Chair of the Board, and I will be conducting this meeting this morning. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we please have roll call?
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Mrs. Burdick. Here. Mr. Curran. Mr. Sear.
Here.
Mr. Demick.
Here.
Mr. Fanton.
Here.
Mrs. Hanchett.
Here.
Mr. Harris. Mr. Havey.
Here.
Mr. Healy.
Here.
Mr. Ricky.
Here.
Mrs. Ricketts Swales.
Here.
Mrs. Rue.
Here.
Mr. Rumfeld. Mr. Stockin.
Here.
12 present, 3 absent.
Thank you. Meeting today will have to do with ARPA funds. That's our main discussion. A little bit of ground rules we're going to lay out is I know there's going to be a lot of discussion and comments. If you would please raise your hand and allow me to call on you so we don't get too out of hand, would certainly appreciate it. If you have a question for someone, we'll try to have them step up and answer what they can. We'll start this out with the treasurer, Ms. Ross, has handed out handouts, and we'll let her go over that first, and we'll move from there.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
I handed out a few sheets. Brenda's going to be able to post them on the screen as well. They are small. They're a little difficult to read, but this is an update from the last month, which I gave you one at the end of March, at the last meeting before March. So this is an update to date of what has been allocated by the board from our ARPA funding, and what discussions that we've had or things that have been discussed since we got the money, I guess, since we knew we were getting the money. So it's kind of a long list. But if we want to go through the things that you have approved by resolution so far are the pictometry contract, which was $560,000. The emergency management MTS contract, which was $600,000. Let me go back. This started in October, is when you started allocating, October of 22. Remember that everything has to be allocated by December of 24, and the projects have to be completed by December of 26. Just some good dates for you to remember. So in October, you did both the pictometry project and the MTS contract for $600,000. Then you did the Parks and Recs, the forest land contract for $321,000. You did the retention bonus for $500,000 in November of 22. In December, you did the countywide direct digital control system, and that was for $325,000. Then in December, you also did the law enforcement records management system for $450,000. You approved the purchase of a shared equipment with soil and water, which was the excavator, which is $172,000. So that was through December of 22. In January of 23, and I will give you an update. I do have an update on what we've spent so far. Most of it has had very little spent, depending on the contract, if they're in place or not. But I will update you on the excavator. The excavator did arrive, and we will be paying soil and water for that. That just happened this week. So in January, you started out with the information technology improvement contract to the countywide infrastructure for $230,000. You also, in February, approved an emergency medical services study. That was for $79,000. You did a comprehensive strategic planning service for economic development contract for $65,050. In March, you awarded to the Tri-County Arts Council an allocation of $11,500. And in April, you approved an allocation to the airport for $50,000. So to date, that is what we have actually had allocated by resolution, and that is $3,363,550. You also, by committee, have approved an allocation for $450,000 to the fair. As you'll know, we haven't approved a resolution for that yet because that was on the earmarked monies that we were checking to see if we could get through Delta that we pushed for the ag.
Is that on
Money.
the second page?
No, that is on the first page. Very last
see it,
one,
so.
yeah. So actually by committee and then further board, without that fair one, with the fair one, you've allocated $3,813,550.
So just for people listening, and you perhaps could you explain the Delta thing there, just so they know that's the outside funding? Is that
Right.
correct?
The Delta contract, and I'm really not the expert on that, that would be at the back table, but the Delta contract is, it's just a connection we have made that they will go and try to find other funding sources for projects that the county has. We gave them 2 projects, and one of them was the fair because they were thinking that that would fall underneath the ag bill. And
So hopefully they'll come out of non-county dollars.
Yep, hopefully that would be non-county dollars. There will be a match. The match might be about $100,000, but we can take out of what you've already approved and maybe reduce the allocation and just do it for the match. So we'll find out more. I believe that went through the first step, though, correct? Made it through the first step, so we're hopeful.
Well, I'd like to just thank you for all your diligence in trying to find all the outside funding sources we can for all our projects. Thank you.
Legislator Root, do you
I'm just one
have
of the
some-
team, so.
I want to thank you for all this information. This is really
Yep.
great information. I think it's going to be really helpful for us. I guess where is the Delta? Did we not, went through committee, did it not go through the board yet? Was that coming out of the ARPA funds? I mean, I don't see it on here. Was it coming out of ARPA?
I believe that's not been approved yet.
Okay, so that's still to come to the board, but it went through committee, I believe.
We have a contract, I just don't think we decided what funding source we were using to pay the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So I apologize for that being small. It is small to read, but I think we went through all that. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Legislator Hanchett?
Yes, with the fair, which is exciting to see, is that with the building or without the building? I know we talked about that.
That is without,
Without the bill.
Without the building?
on the ARPA suggestion,
Correct.
and it's through the Delta funding.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else before we move on?
Yeah, looking back at the resolution with Delta, we used the fund balance set aside for economic development to pay for it.
I'm sorry, that was, yeah, I was trying to think.
Okay.
I was trying to think of what that was, but yes, we used economic development because we felt that that was going to be further than just what we had for ARPA. That was going to be more
Thank you.
involved countywide. Thank you. See, it really does take a team, so. The next page in your packet is a list that we've been trying to keep of potential projects for ARPA. This is only the list that we have for ARPA. We have many lists of projects going on around the county. We keep a list, an ongoing list at budget time that we look at of whether we want to put it in the budget or not, or if that's going to be discussed. But these particular projects on this list are all that have been brought up in committee or conversations or in lists that were developed back from department head surveys when we first started with the ARPA money and gone forward. So if we can go through these are just some of the ones that we have. Some do not have dollar amounts because we have not gotten that far where we've gotten an actual estimate. So one of the top things on here, I'll just go down the list, are the Board of Elections voting machines. That's $550,000. The panel truss bridge system was $300,000. The traffic signal system is $60,000. The build-out of the third floor is $600,000. The new roof on this particular building is $500,000. The water tower on the roof, we don't have an estimate for that. Windows for the county office building are estimated at $250,000. The Public Works building, if you remember that we had that on there at one point in time, when it was a smaller structure, we have removed that from this list in particular because there's probably other funding that we'll use for that. The Episcopal Church property, no value. The parking lot, no value. Municipal monies, which talked about, there's no value. GIS, the RFP for the GIS is $40,000 estimate. And I will note that some of these estimates for proposals and studies are probably going to come in higher. And probably most of what's on here would, it's really just a ballpark estimate. So the GIS was $40,000. The space needs study was $100,000. A housing study was $80,000. A brownfield inventory study was $50,000. The clarity request was $300,000. The water and sewer study countywide has no value on that. So these additional projects with all the, taking into consideration, not everyone has one, is a value, is $2.83 million. So with all of that, plus what you've already allocated, the total ARPA possibilities to date are $6.643,550,000, and that leaves approximately $2.3 million. Gary, Fred's not looking at you, but I'll.
Legislator Barnes?
Yes, a little bit of background. The ARPA funds were awarded nearly $9 million. Where are those funds? Were they given us that money up front, or do we have to claim it each time we approve a project?
Nope, those monies were advanced to us in two different tranches, $4 million some apiece, and we have that, and we have deferred that revenue out until you guys decide to.
Okay, so the money is in
So we
hand.
have the cash, yeah.
Now, I've heard and read in the news recently about the federal government trying to get some money back, and if it's not spent. So is it to our advantage to get this money spent as quickly as possible, not wait until the last minute in '26?
Well, you have to have it allocated by December of '24.
Okay.
So you can't wait until '26 anyway. You have to have it spoken for by December of '24.
It has to be spent by
It has to
26.
be allocated. It has to be spent by December of '26.
Okay.
And that means having things bid with an actual.
Contracted, everything.
Something you can contract to, so there's work to do between now and then to move ahead. So there's a lot of things we gotta do yet.
So essentially, we got a year and a half
To
to
commit.
allocate.
To commit it, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd say the sooner the better on that as well. We're in the process of filing a report that's due on Friday for the ARPA funding, and we've been working with the auditors to get that accomplished, and unfortunately, we were under the impression that we would be able to say, this is everything, just like that first number I gave you, that $3.5 million, that we had allocated all that. Unfortunately, the report requires that you have contracts for all of that to report it as being allocated. So we can only allocate what we have contracts for, which still is a significant amount of money. I'm not saying that it's not. And, but that was kind of a little twist, because we were under the impression it was if you allocated it, you could report it as allocated. But it was a little bit different. So we're working on that, through that. But next time will be, because we'll have some of the other contracts in place the next reporting period.
Mr. Fanton?
Yeah, I would like to speak to the truss bridge system and the signal system. We are now faced with New York State flagging bridges. A lot of them are the old steel decks that were put on back in 1972-3 after the flood. And they're just going around and flagging them. We have one over the other side of Whitesville that the farms use, the chicken farm and the pig farm and a lot of small farmers, that bridge has been flagged at 25 ton. It's a 56-foot bridge. We can't put culverts in it. We're going to need to have some way to cross that to keep that travel flowing. They don't have another route out of there except on gravel roads and up steep hills. And it's not really, it's something we've got to look at, I think, for next year as far as replacing that bridge, if not sooner. But we also have other ones that are going to be faced with the same situation, that this system will benefit all of Allegheny County and the towns, because we're going to be able to put in a one-lane process that they can cross. And there's a number of places we cannot use culverts, and there's a number of places that the detour has been, it's way out of the way, so, or the roads are not really applicable for that kind of traffic. Along with this, I would like to thank New York State DOT. We've been awarded the $8.5 million for that county, 26 bridge, and also I believe now we have 6.5 for County Route 4 bridge, and these are bridges that are in the millions of dollars that they've been able to get to us, and just as a thank you to the New York State DOT and those people, we really appreciate it. So thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Legislator Fanton. Legislator Ricketts Wales.
Mine's just a quick question on totals again. So on this page that we're looking at, the second page here, the white line, the total ARPA possibilities to date, that sum is the total of the first page and the second page, plus the possibility of the pink line, is that right?
No, the pink line is what
Okay.
you have left after everything.
Oh, okay, okay.
So the first page had a total of $3.813 million that
Right.
was allocated. The second page has 2.830
Right.
of possibilities. The combination of the two of them is the 6.6 million,
Okay.
leaving you a balance of the 2.39,
Okay.
309.
I'm just trying to take
Yep.
really good notes,
The
so-
pink one is the balance if you did everything on this list.
Okay.
Legislator Ricky.
Yes, so what do you get for 50 grand on a brownfield inventory? What all does that include? I don't know if that's a specific question for you or the A-team.
Yeah, I think, my understanding is that they'll go through the entire county and they'll try to identify the brownfield properties that could be eligible for funding. And
Yes,
that would be for cleanup funding.
I think that was just to inventory, come up with an inventory. It does not involve any of the works getting ready to market those as brownfields. That would be a phase 2 that you would have to commit funds on if you wanted to take that further. It would just be initially going around and looking for the properties and inventorying them.
Okay, and one other thing, the housing study, is that anything the land banks could get involved in? Because they're kind of branching out. Is that something that's in their wheelhouse?
So I think it could be in their wheelhouse. They're definitely very interested in the county doing a housing study. I am not sure they are prepared to do one themselves. They have limited funds. They do have some grant monies for administrative uses, but I don't know if it would be sufficient to do everything they're doing and do a housing study.
Thank you.
And I think my understanding of the housing study is it looks at all housing, regardless of the status of the housing. So it looks at what's available for people to come in and, live here, grow their businesses here, and that kind of thing as well. It looks at all kinds of housing. Yep.
Legislator Burdick.
So if you look at the items that don't have a price tag on them yet, if you were to estimate, I'm guessing that we're pretty close to spending all of our ARPA monies, if we were to go with the ones that don't have any kind of money on them. And then my second question, real quick, is does GIS identify brownfields? No? Okay.
I don't believe that GIS would identify brownfields, but I believe GIS is comprised of a number of data sets. So if you were to do a brownfield inventory and then assign locations to them, you could then probably develop a map with layers that would show all your brownfields.
Thank you.
Legislator Root?
Yeah, I'll just follow up a little bit from my understanding of the brownfield studies, that right now there is federal money out there available to come in and clean up. And economic develop-wise, it would help us in Allegheny County, figure out where all these brownfields are, because developers are very interested in coming into and developing on these brownfields. There is an incentive for them to do that. So if we can figure out where these brownfields are, I think that's the study is number one. They also talked about, after you have the study, which is phase 2 brownfield, what it would take to clean these up. But as far as economic development, this is something we can market to developers, because they're looking to come in on brownfields, because there's a lot of federal money incentive for them to come and clean it up and then rebuild on it. So it could be a good thing for us.
Mr. Healy?
Thank you, Fred. Well, the GSI studies also will not only assist us, the county, but our local governments in their grant applications for outside funding also. Is that correct?
That is correct. And actually, that is a benefit to have the housing study as well. All of those will help any municipality who wants to go forward with some funding allocations. They would have that background for their communities.
Thank you.
Ms. Root?
So I'm looking at some of the housing study, the brownfield inventory, and the water and sewer study. I don't know if this is the time, but I guess there are other funding, and I know I've talked about the Southern Tier West, the ARC money, that Allegheny County has $1.3 million. We were looking for projects to go to for that, and actually those 3 projects were, when I sat down with the Economic Development Group, thought that this was something that we could actually apply through Southern Tier West ARC money. So if we did that, that would actually could take it out of the ARPA money, which would free up more money. But and the water and sewer study, I got an estimate. This was just a really quick estimate from that group, like $500,000 to do that study. I didn't realize this, but with that study, land sales in Allegheny County are becoming harder and harder, because a lot of your villages and communities who don't have sewer systems, your houses, the property that they're on don't meet newer health regulations for a water well and or a septic system. So my understanding is a lot of your villages are having a problem with resale of houses. If you can't put a new septic system on that land. So this is why this came up, that we really need to look at to help Allegheny. And this would help every town and village in Allegheny County who doesn't have a septic system in there, to what they need to do, identify them, and what can be done. So.
Thank you. Ms. Hanchett?
The space needs study, that's gone through committee but not through the board yet, is that correct?
Correct. We're in the process of interviewing. Should be looked at in the very near future. We'll probably have a special Public Works Committee meeting after this committee meeting next week, because we don't have the right timeline to do that, but it'll have to be awarded there. But keep in mind, a lot of the space needs study is going to be part of your new roof, things to do with your buildings. So they're going to kind of go hand in hand.
Okay.
So they'll be drawn out with that.
All right, great. And just to follow up on the brownfield inventory, is the Borden plant in Belmont considered brownfield? I don't know if Krista knows that.
That's what the inventory would decide, and I think it would look at a number of factors. I would assume that would be a good one for them to look at, but whether or not it is a brownfield, I do not know.
Okay.
And going back to just the question before that, the GIS study, the space needs study, those have been through committee for permission to go out for an RFP. So we went out for the RFP, we received proposals, we're reviewing those proposals. When we select a consultant to move forward, we will bring those back to committee for number one, to approve a contract for it, and number two, to figure out where we're getting the funding, if that's ARPA or not. So you may come up with an idea that you think would be a good ARPA idea. That is not the be-all, end-all of that decision. We have to go out and get actual quotes, and then we need to come back and go through the MOE and resolution process.
All right, great.
Legislator Seer. Oh, are you got more, Gretchen?
I just real quick, with the space needs study, when they're coming back in, are we close to that estimate, or are
We
we
are.
fine? We don't know yet.
We are. I think we're planning on, we have a meeting with them and another interview Monday, and that should be the final.
Okay.
And then we'll make our decision from there, I'm sure.
All right.
That's May 1st, right?
Right, right.
And it's not just a space needs, it's also a buildings needs assessment, and they will go through every building, very detailed, and tell us what we need to do to keep our buildings in good condition going forward, or whether these buildings' useful life has already exceeded and we need to come up with another plan.
They may identify things that we don't even have on our list
Right.
that we may have to add to that in a quicker hurry than what we would plan on.
Okay.
So
So I
that's-
think it's probably pretty important as we look at some of these things too, when we're getting some of these studies done, what monies will we have left then to do the things that are imperative that we do? I mean, so that's something we have to consider too.
But it's
I'm
hard to
sure.
even go to that route if you
I
don't
know.
have the study to tell you what you got to do, something we can work on. It's like the space needs studies in the past have not always identified future
Right.
issues going forward. It may deal with something as short term. What we're pushing for this space needs study is to have 5, 10, 15-year ideas, questions answered, a little bit more of a game plan that we can just update versus having to start at anew, like we have been, so.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Legislator Seer.
I just wanted to take a note and say Happy Administrative Professionals Day to everybody in this building.
Thank you. Legislator Burdick.
Do you have any kind of time frame once they start the study, about how long it'll take for them to actually do the study and then get a report back to them? And I guess that would apply to all the studies. Because if we're looking at a time frame on getting this money appropriated, those studies are going to be really important on whether we use ARPA money for some of these projects. So I'm just wondering if we're going to have a time frame long enough to incorporate all of this.
I do know that the space needs, they're between 4 and 6 months. I think Carissa can address the EMS study and different other ones.
I believe the EMS study should be finalized this fall. However, they may have some more immediate recommendations there. The same with the space needs. I would expect 6 months, but they may have some more immediate recommendations as we do some temporary moves. The GIS one, we're just reviewing the proposals, and I can't remember what their time frame would be on that. I would say any study is probably 4 to 6 months out. So if you want to spend money on that study out of ARPA, you would then need to backtrack that. However, some of these things may fall well into budget. They may fall well into other grant streams, or we may be looking at Delta to look for other funding that we're not aware of. So the study itself is worthwhile. The studies also help us get grant money because we have a very factual basis to go after the grants with.
Legislator Burdick.
Can I
Because
just
of
add some-
that,
Can I add something just in the middle too? I think it's a good time to actually, remind everyone that there are also internal studies happening at the same time. As much as we're having that building and that space needs, there's also internal studies about needs that we have as far as bridges, equipment, those kind of things. So they're all going to take money at some point in time. So, Deb talks about the different buckets of money. We're going to have to look at all of those buckets of money at the same time. So once all the studies get back, we'll be able to determine further what happens, what you want to do with the studies, what you need to address with the studies, the lists, the inventories, all of that. So there's a lot going on. It just might not be apparent to everyone that there's a lot of internal stuff going on as well.
so I think my comment then is that I personally don't think we should be approving spending any more ARPA money requests until we have a better idea of what some of these projects are going to cost us and whether they're going to come out of ARPA or not. we don't have, 2 million sounds like a lot, but it really isn't when you start spending it. And I think we need to reserve this money. I mean, if we're going to need this ARPA money to accomplish some of these projects and these studies, then I think we need to really table any request for ARPA money at this point until we're sure we have enough to complete our own projects.
And I agree with that. And I think what we really need to do, that we discussed earlier, is some of these bids and quotes and going out for pricing, we need to get that stuff on the table so we have a better idea what some of the stuff's gonna cost moving forward. Even if it can be used out of our budget item or where we're gonna use it from, but until we get some definite figures on some stuff, there's a lot of proposals here with some what-ifs to it. I just think that is something that we're gonna have to take the bull by the horns and get some of these bids and contracts looked at, so. Right. Ms. Root?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm just looking at this. If we do go out for the space needs study, I just really quickly, what would fall out of there was, your build, we would get more information about the third floor, the new roof, the water tower, the windows, the church property, the parking lot, and clarity, I would think all would fall under that. So I would think we would just put a hold on all that until that space needs study was done. I totally agree.
Right.
Well, the space needs study will also address our current issue with employment and training and
Yeah.
any other issue we have.
Yeah.
What are the best uses of some of the facilities we have, the mental health issues. I mean, there's a lot of different issues that the space study will throw all in the one bucket, and you'll be able to look at that.
So I
Which is
agree. I
huge,
think we
which
need
is
to
huge.
put some of this stuff on hold. However, I think there's maybe a couple here. I would agree with Dwight. I think the bridge system and the traffic signal, we're not waiting for a study. I think that is something we know we need, and that will have an immediate impact this summer on that. So I would see perhaps that we could move ahead with that. I don't, but a lot of that I do agree, we need to get our studies done and do. So. And I don't know, Board of Election Machines, I don't know where that stands. I don't know if that was just a,
I believe they're looking to have something not for the primary, but for the November election. Have you heard that at all?
I believe they are working with our county attorney to develop a bid form,
Right.
and that there's really only 2 to 3 vendors out there. They've already looked at the machines, and now we just need to competitively bid it so we can move forward with a contract.
All right, there's no piggyback or OGS for most of those new machines, from what I understand.
That's what I understand too. They're all so new that they really don't have any contracts in existence with the state or other counties that we could work with.
Mr. Fanton?
And that doesn't necessarily mean that those items have to be purchased from ARPA.
Right.
There are other funding sources that we have. I know I've been up here and mentioned that, we've got money in other buckets that we could use for those items, so they don't have to come out of ARPA. That is something that, if you really are interested in doing those things, then we can look at all the other funding sources as well, if you want to not spend ARPA on those and look at other choices.
Mr. Fanton?
Yeah, just on the truss system and the traffic signal system, I think we do have a couple bridges this year that these things are very applicable to, and we know what the cost is, and we know what the benefit is, because if you've had to take detours around everything, and a couple of these bridges are not applicable to our culvert system. So, again, I'll go back to the point where anybody that uses these roads are going to appreciate it, and if not that town or county road now, down the road, it's going to be a great benefit to what we got. So I'd like to see us move along on that one also.
Thank you.
I do agree, Dwight. I think that's probably pretty important to move on, and it really kind of falls under what ARPA money should be used for on that. So I agree. I think it's something we probably should move forward with too. And it's a safety issue on top of that.
Anyone else? Does anyone from the A-team have anything they want to add?
We'll say the third page of your packet just goes through and shows what was allocated, what is been discussed, and what, it's by category. I shouldn't really have put department on there. It's more about a category than it is a specific department. I also have split out what monies have gone to outside agencies for what has been allocated and what is being discussed. So that's just kind of a little cheat sheet. Someone asked me if I could divvy that up by category, and that's what that is. And that's all I have for an update.
Yep.
No, I don't think it hasn't gotten anywhere that I'm aware of. We spent all but $6,000 that was allocated. So if you're gonna look at something else to do, then you would have to bring that back up again and find the funding for that, because there's not enough money in there to do that. And I think the parameters are what was being discussed about how that would happen.
Right, but it was talked about it coming out of ARPA like the other bonus was. And I think it was just, I had presented a sample resolution, and I know there was concern about how we would do it, like I said, the parameters. And I feel kind of strongly that we need to revisit that. I just feel strong.
Yeah, that has not gone any further than I know of.
Anyone else? Madam Treasurer, I'd like to thank you very much for what you brought to us. Same way with the rest of the A-team that's been involved. I'd like to think that we revisit this in the next month and a half or so to keep ourselves updated on this. I think would be very important. So if does anybody else have any other good of the order? Mr. Stocking.
I don't have good of the order, but where are we going with this bridge and the traffic signal? I mean, what's the next step to make this happen?
Yeah.
This is
Well,
the same.
it's went through Ways and Means.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation today really isn't any different than it was last time we discussed this.
Right.
We need to do something with it.
Right.
And if we don't want to do it out of ARPA to save the ARPA money for something that can't come somewhere else.
Right, there is other money
Yeah.
for that. So if you're seriously interested in purchasing that, then I will come back with different options, the multiple options that you have to pay for that, if that's what you really want to pursue.
Mr. Fan.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that. I know there's other money for that, but when we take the money, the other money, it takes it out of our capital projects, which is our bridge projects. And I'm just letting you know, we're going to be faced with some things that we've got to do that are kind of out of the norm. So we're going to need every dollar we've got in those capital projects. So I would strongly suggest that we make a decision on this. We need to get this stuff ordered so we can use it this summer. We can get it by June if we get it ordered fairly soon. And so I don't know where we need to go with it. I'd rather not wait. I would rather see the benefit that we're going to have, not only for us, but for the towns that are going to be affected by these bridges. So I would rather move along. If there's any way we can get enough votes to move it, I would certainly propose that we and make a motion. I don't know if it's out of order, but make a motion that we use those funds, ARPA funds, for those two items. And so if I'm not out of order, I'm making a motion.
All right, we have a motion on the floor.
Maybe I'll second that.
Mr. Stocking will second it. Any discussion, Mr. Barnes?
I was just going to say that I fully support that, but I also had a question. for the treasurer, but I'll wait until she comes back.
Mr. Seer?
I would support this wholeheartedly as well, but I would also suggest, my wishes would be that the money to pay for this bridge would either be out of the general fund or ARPA, and not ding, basically, Public Works. Thank you.
Mr. Barnes?
Yeah, other monies, that's been brought up several times. There's other monies for this, there's other monies for that. What are these other monies?
Well, I think I addressed some of that prior. There is a fund in the capital fund that money gets deposited at year end from any project that has been over budgeted and there's leftover money. That fund is currently about $1.2 million. We could take the money out of that and not affect anything. Other than that, that would go down. That money has been saved for those kind of purchases. It's either equipment or capital. So it could be used to do that, which is where I would recommend that happens, because that is something that the board put in place to try to save money for things that weren't normally budgeted. I would suggest that that's where it comes from. The other options are to appropriate fund balance, you know, to really look at their budget, to look at our entire budget, the countywide budget, and see if there is money there or there is ARPA. But if you, it needs to be really, it needs to be vetted to see if that's what you want. And, you know, I think it, to be honest with you, I think it should be an executive session or attorney-client. I think it requires more discussion, is how I feel, I guess, Gary. There is money there to purchase this, if that is what the board wants. And if that's what, you know, DPW's request is, then I think there's money to do that.
Mr. Fan?
Yeah, I know Terry feels strongly about this. I feel strongly about the other. Again, if you take it out of our reserve capital funds, and we have it there because we've been efficient on the projects that we've done, bridge projects and everything else. So we're going to need that money for bridges. And so I'm making a case that it's money that we need to have for repairs, for bridges, and for replacement of bridges. So I know Terry feels strongly about it, but I feel strongly about keeping it in the fund that it needs to be done for, that we're going to need money for. So, thank you.
Ms. Burdick?
Since we have time and Terry's suggesting an executive session, I think this would be the time to discuss this further. So I would make a motion that we go to executive session to discuss potential contracts. Or attorney-client, whichever you feel is.
Objection, Mr. Chairman, there's absolutely no reason I can think of that you can go into executive session to discuss budget.
Well, then how about attorney-client then?
I have absolutely no information that would qualify for attorney-client.
We have a second. Could we get opinion from our county attorney?
We have a motion on the floor.
Well, Mr. Vice Chairman, first of all, there is no reason why an objection can be made by a member of the public for a motion regarding a request for executive session. Second of all, if there is a legal question that anyone from any of the legislators need to ask, we can go into attorney-client for that reason. Third of all, we have discussed some projects that would require, we are discussing two items that would be involving the entering of a contract. So we could go into may have a motion for executive session to discuss the entering of a contract, and which may entail discussions regarding the funding source of those contracts.
Okay, we have a first and a second.
We have a motion and a second on the other
Do
one
we have
first.
to address the motion on the floor before we can go into executive session?
What motion is that? The objection?
No.
No,
The one
the
before.
motion to use ARPA funds to purchase the truss bridge and the light system.
You are having are you having discussion about that motion right now?
We have been, yes.
So if you are going into you are currently having discussion, you are requiring an executive session that is pertaining to that discussion. So you can go into executive session.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we have a first and second for executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried.
Oh, well, you had some, you may want to take, because there was some people that said, I would do a roll call on this.
Okay.
And there was a call for a roll call, I heard.
We have a roll call, please?
This is a roll call of whether or not to go into executive session.
Correct.
Mr. Barnes.
Aye.
Mrs. Burdick.
Yes.
Mr. Curran. Absent. Mr. Seer.
Yes.
Mr. Demick.
Yes.
Mr. Fanton.
Yes.
Mrs. Hanchett.
Yes.
Mr. Havey.
Yes.
Mr. Healy.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky.
Yes.
Mrs. Ricketts Swales.
Yes.
Mrs. Root.
No.
Mr. Stockin. 11 ayes, 1 no, 3 absent.
Motion's approved. Go into executive session.